Good afternoon. We have with us Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa, a renowned novelist from Kannada. H.M. Nayak has rightly said that Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa is an Indian novelist who writes in Kannada. Let me briefly introduce myself. I am Prasanna Deshpande and I am here today with this legendary novelist Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa. What H.M. Nayak means, to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my understanding, when he says that Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa is an Indian novelist who writes in Kannada. When we read his novel, we find that everything about his novels is about this great country of ours, and he does that with such an aesthetic and creative excellence that we don't even feel that he is actually being a nationalist or somebody who wants to be very explicit with his love and admiration of the great nation that India is. He has incorporated his great ideas in the context of the stories that we find as highly engaging and moving. Let us welcome this legendary novelist, Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa. A very warm welcome, sir. To commence the interview, I would like to ask you, our viewers would also want to know from someone like you, from a novelist of your stature, why do you write?
You see, I come from a very poor family. My mother was a very wise lady, and my father was a totally irresponsible person. And those days, plague was visiting our villages throughout India. And once plague struck our family, in which my elder sister, who was married only 20 days before, and my elder brother and myself got plague. My elder sister and my elder brother died in a span of 1 hour. Somehow I survived. And next year or so, my mother died of plague. And then after 2 years, my younger brother, who was 5-year-old, died, and I was a boy of 15 years. I carried the dead body of my younger brother and I cremated him. And after maybe a year or so, my youngest sister, who was then 3 or 4 years, she died. All these things made me to ask the question, what is death? What happens to people after death? And why do people die? After the death of my mother, at least once in a month or once in 6 weeks, my mother was appearing in my dream. In the dream, she was wearing white saree and she was standing at a distance of about 20 yards in an open space, and I used to feel exalted,
Okay.
and I wanted to go and catch hold of my mother
Okay.
so that she would not go away again. I used to walk towards her, and when I was about to go near her and then hold her arms, she would vanish.
Were you still a teenager?
Huh?
Were you
Yes, I
still
was a teenager.
Okay.
I was a teenager. I was 12 years or so.
Okay.
So she would vanish, and my dream would break, and I would become awake.
Okay.
Then I was trying to sleep again and get the same dream. No, that wouldn't come. And the same dream was repeating
Okay.
once in a month or once in 6 weeks. So this way, about a year, I used to see my mother in my dream.
Oh.
And later, she didn't appear.
Okay.
Now, this made me think, why do people die?
Okay.
And why does a mother die before young children? This was bothering me. Then when I went to Mysore to study my high school, and there I used to attend lectures delivered by learned people. And there was a professor of philosophy by name Yamunacharya. And he was a learned person and a very pious person. So I met him and then put my questions before him. What is death? Why do people die? And so on. Then he gave me Kannada translation of Kathopanishad and asked me to read it. I read it, but the portion of the story or the context of the Kathopanishad, namely Nachiketa, you see, going to Yama, you know that story.
Yes.
Apart from that, I could not understand anything. I again went to the professor, and then I said, I cannot understand anything except the story. And he said, it is philosophy. Philosophy requires systematic study. So just by reading yourself, you can't understand it. It is better you take philosophy for your BA honors.
Yes.
So I took philosophy and I immersed myself in philosophy. Like I did my BA honors and then I did my MA and then I also did my PhD in philosophy. Of course, in philosophy, I studied aesthetics, comparing truth with beauty.
I think your
Baroda.
PhD thesis is also...
Yes, in Baroda.
Yes.
And I got very good guidance and then very good help from Dr. Jadhav of Baroda University. So this way I immersed myself in philosophy. Then I had observed within me, what do I get from study of philosophy? They say that in philosophy, if you study philosophy, you will get the truth. The question is, what is truth? And my study of philosophy made me to realize that after all, truth is multidimensional. A physicist also discovers truth. A chemistry man discovers truth. A political science man discovers another kind of truth. So, what is the use of philosophy? Then I realized philosophy is the study of values. And we cannot claim different kinds of truths in philosophy. After all, the Indian spiritualists say that what you realize in spiritual sadhana is truth. See, it is something which I could not realize because I did not practice any dhyana, etc.
Although for some part of your life, during your struggling days, you were with some sadhus.
Yes, I was with sadhu. Then, when I submitted my PhD thesis to the university, I had some leisure. Meanwhile, the idea of a novel developed in my mind. That was Vamsharuksha. And when I wrote Vamsharuksha, I realized that when I write a story or a novel, I get conflicts of values.
Yes.
And then I can probe into roots of values in literature, through literature.
Correct.
And not in theoretical philosophy. At least I could not. I would not reject all theoretical philosophy, but to me, to my temperament, I could explore the meaning of values through characters and through context. In philosophy, in literature, I can create a context and then I can probe into it. So this is a more concrete way.
Like what the ancient sages did. Like what the ancient sages did. The Vedic philosophy, the Vedanta, was transferred into Upanishads in a more dilute form for the perusal of the common people, and it further reached to the common people in the form of the Puranas.
No, what I realized was this. Vedas are the basis of Indian concept of values.
And consciousness?
Yes. And then, in Vedas, in short, Vedas and the Upanishads, in short, succinct forms, values are expressed through different myths. Myth is a story. Pregnant with meaning.
It is a metaphor.
Yes. So, that is one stage. And then the essence of the Vedas are expressed in the Upanishads. What is the essence of the Upanishads? And different people, try to explain the essence of the Upanishads in different ways. Then a learned sage came. His name was Badarayana. And Badarayana wrote the essence of the Upanishads in the form of sutras. So he expressed, saying all the essence of the Upanishads in the form of formulas. He thought he was trying to explain the essence of the Upanishads, which are scattered in various Upanishads. See, Upanishads, how many Upanishads are there? It's only because Shankaracharya commented upon only 10 Upanishads. He chose 10 Upanishads. And people believe Dashopanishad. No, it is not. There are more than 120 Upanishads. The meanings interspaced. Like what is said in one Upanishad appears in another Upanishad, and so on. So this is what Badarayana said. It is called Badarayana's Brahma Sutra. But what happened was, what was the sutras of Badarayana became so difficult for ordinary people to understand.
Exactly.
That it requires again study of the Upanishads and the study of the Vedas to explain the meaning of Badarayana. Badarayana wrote his sutras with a view to simplify the teachings of the Upanishads, so that ordinary people can understand. But it became more difficult than the original Upanishads. So learned people started writing Vyakhyana of this Badarayana's Brahma Sutras. And when they wrote their Vyakhyanas, again they went to Upanishads and went to the Vedas. Shankaracharya wrote, Ramanujacharya wrote, Madhvacharya wrote, and Vallabhacharya wrote, and so many other people followed. But these people, their writings are very learned, true, but it did not reach the common people. You just ask any person, what is Badarayana's Brahma Sutra? Many people have not even heard this. That is, Indian philosophy developed in this way. But another thing, two great things happened. That is the writing of Ramayana and writing of the Mahabharata. Now, Ramayana is earlier. Now, according to Yugas, Kruta Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara and then Kali Yuga. Ramayana was written by Valmiki in Treta Yuga, that is the second Yuga. And that represents the earlier concept of values. What Valmiki has written in the Ramayana are the earlier concepts of values. So from this point of view, the values propounded in the Ramayana are straightforward and simple.
Because it was the early beginning.
But in the next one, in Mahabharata, the conflicts of values, the complexities of values, that means values are not so simple, they are complex. So, in the Mahabharata, the next stage of values are discussed, and it is the Ramayana and Mahabharata which spread throughout India and which unified India. It has reached the common people. Now, what lesson did it give to me as a budding creative writer? By that time, I had studied philosophy, MA, and then I was teaching
even Western philosophy,
Western and Indian. And also I had written a novel, Vamsharuksha novel. I had written. Then I thought, my vocation is literature, creative literature. So that whatever the philosophy I had, whatever the probe into values I want to do, I can do it in a more concrete form through literature, where I can create a context, I can create a narrative, and I can create characters, and I can create conflict between different characters, etc. So that I can go deeper. That is, my model was Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Okay.
It is this philosophy and what I discovered in philosophy, is the study of values. And study of values I can do more concretely through creative writing. So I realized one thing. In philosophy, I cannot be a creative person. Who are creative persons? Vedas, Upanishads, and the Buddha, Jina, and so on, and many commentators also. They are creative. But can I become creative in philosophy as these great seers did? No, it's not in my temperament. So, but I want to probe the nature of values. What is good, what is bad, and complexity of values, etc. Only through literature. Thus, in that way, I turned towards literature.
Writing.
And what happened at that time was, I had not studied. When I wrote Vamsharuksha, I wrote Vamsharuksha with the knowledge of form of a novel, which I vaguely had understood by reading Kannada novels and some English novels.
Right.
I had not made systematic study of novels.
Right.
Then I realized, until and unless I make systematic study of novels, I cannot become a good novelist. Then I was a lecturer in Sardar Patel University in philosophy,
Gujarat.
And I had a friend who was head of the department of English.
Okay.
His name was R.A. Dave.
Okay.
I just asked him, this is my problem. I want to come and sit in your English classes.
Okay.
And then he consulted with his colleagues.
Okay.
And many colleagues said, we feel embarrassed that a man who has done PhD in aesthetics, sitting in our class, we feel embarrassed. Don't. And he expressed it. Then he asked me, what is your purpose?
Okay.
I said, I want to study novel. Then he said, I will guide you.
Okay.
All that you want to do is, I will give you a list of about 25 novels in the West.
Okay.
That means how novels developed in different Western languages. And also I will give you some books about the structure of the novel, form of the novel, and, so aspects of novel.
This is how you got an exposure to the classics.
Yes, classics.
English novels.
Yes.
Okay.
Not merely English.
Okay.
Western.
European novels.
Yeah, Europe. For example, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and then French novelists, French realists.
Realist, right.
Émile Zola, Gustave Flaubert.
James Joyce and others.
Yes. And so on and so forth. I took about 2 years to study all these things. One thing in my nature is, whatever the work I do, I take it seriously.
Yes.
And of course, there was another man called L.D. Dave, who was a professor of English in Gujarat College, Ahmedabad.
Okay.
He had specialized in novels.
I see.
This R.A. Dave introduced me to that L.D. Dave.
Okay.
And he also guided me. And afterwards I took to writing novels only. One important thing happened. After my PhD, for valuing my PhD thesis, one V.S. Naravane,
Okay.
who was professor of philosophy in Allahabad University, he was the guide. He was the
Thesis evaluator.
Yes, examiner.
Examiner.
He came, and what he did was, he asked me, Dr. Bhayrappa, he addressed me as Dr. Bhayrappa.
Even before the
Yes, before.
Viva.
Yes. See, here is your thesis. We have recommended to the university to publish this thesis.
Okay.
But before that, do you think that you have to eliminate some unnecessary padding? I said yes.
Okay.
Before publishing, I want to eliminate many things. Then he said, knowing it, why did you write it?
If you agree to eliminate it,
Yes.
why did you write it as a researcher?
And then immediately Dr. Javadekar intervened and then said, I asked him to pad up.
Okay.
Because usually examiners want it.
Okay.
So this way it happened.
Yes, yeah.
And it was in Baroda. It was my summer vacation. I had come from Karnataka to Baroda specially for this only.
I see.
And then it was all formality. And then Dr. Naravane had a plan to go to Bombay from Baroda by the night train. And he came to know that I was also going back to Bombay, Bombay on the way to Karnataka. Then he said, I will give you some ideas. Let us travel together. And he gave me his ticket and then said, change your ticket so that we can travel together. It was first class. His was first class.
Yes.
And
in those days,
I could not afford it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went to counter and then I paid and requested, and we were put in the same compartment.
Okay.
So the whole night we were discussing. And Naravane said, I suggest to you to do research. Now in your thesis you have done truth and beauty yesterday in correlation. That was my PhD thesis.
Right.
And then he said, you continue the study into beauty and goodness.
Okay.
So that it comes full circle. And publish it. And you submit that published work to Bombay University and you will get a D.Litt degree. And with 2 doctorates, it helps you in your professional career. In fact, I have some ideas about these things.
Okay.
But I myself could write on this, but I am not as hard-working as you are.
Okay.
Because you have completed your PhD thesis in 12 months. That is what Dr. Javadekar has told me.
Okay.
So, you are a hard-working man.
Okay.
I will give you my notes.
Okay.
He said. I immediately started doing it. Already I had written Vamsharuksha.
Yes.
I immediately started doing for my D.Litt.
Beauty and goodness.
And my Dr. Javadekar says, I will assist you.
Okay.
Even though a D.Litt work should be done independently. Yes, it was all independent, but there is nothing wrong if you take, discuss with some others.
Right.
I worked on it for 2.5 years.
Okay.
2.5 years.
Okay.
I had already written Vamsharuksha, and my publisher was at Hubli. And then I had told my publisher, I have written a new novel called Vamsharuksha. It is a better novel than my earlier two novels, which he had published. And I will send it to you after I revise it.
Bhimakaya and Dharmashree.
Huh?
Bhimakaya and Dharmashree.
Dharmashree. And then he started writing to me letters saying, where is Vamsharuksha? Why? I have already announced it in the papers here. I was not even replying him.
Okay.
And at last he wrote a very, strong letter.
Okay.
Then, without, I kept this thesis work, 2.5 years of research on beauty and then goodness. And then I started reading that manuscript to Vamsharuksha.
Okay.
Once I read it, I thought, this is really a good work.
Oh.
And I can be a creative writer. And also I realized, here I can become original. Whereas in this thesis, what am I doing? Comparing this theory with that theory and so on, and all dry work.
Exactly.
And I can't be original in this.
There is no life force in it.
Yes. So for about some time, I struggled for nearly a month. And then I said, I will stop this. After all, I have a PhD and I am already a lecturer. And I may not get promotion, but with this, nobody will take my the lecturership. So this is my life, writing novels. Then I met Dave, and he asked me to give me a list of 25 novels, Western classical, classic novels. And then I was studying literature, this thing, the
Western literature.
Western literature. Dr. Javadekar had faith in me. He said, Bhyrappa is hard working and he doesn't require any supervision, etc. He was not asking anything, though I was meeting him often. After about a year, he asked me, what is the progress of your daily work? I said, sir, I have abandoned it. That is not my area. I am studying literature, novels. He became very angry. And then he said, Bhyrappa, some people are intelligent, but not hard-working. Some people are hard-working, but not intelligent. You are both intelligent and hard-working. But a devil called literature has taken possession of you.
Yes.
Stop it. I expect something more from you. He became angry. He became so angry that he stopped talking to me for nearly 6 months. But I was feeling, feeling bad. But I could not help it. So, by then I left Gujarat and then I went to Delhi for a new job.
NCERT.
In NCERT. And meanwhile, Vamsharuksha was translated into Hindi. I sent a copy of Vamsharuksha to Dr. Javadekar. And Javadekar used to come to Delhi for some meetings. Next time when he came, he stayed with me. And he bought me clothes, good clothes, for a full suit and a shirt. And gave me those clothes.
That's nice.
With 150 rupees as tailor's charge.
That's very nice of him.
And then he said, this is for your novel Vamsharuksha.
So literature was no longer a devil now.
And then he said, you have not deserted philosophy, but you have expressed philosophy. Then
What a great compliment, sir. Thank you so much. for such an enlightening description on the very process of the origin of your novels as well as your making as a novelist. That had been there on my mind for a long time to get to ask you this question at some point of time, and I'm really glad that your answer is a thesis in itself on the making of a novelist and also on the making of a novel. Thank you so much for that. So with this, I would like to move to my next question. The question to you, sir, is how do you pursue this conflict between the inherent, congenital, culturally sensitive liberalism which originates into the value system in India and the ideologically founded liberalism which is facilitated by the means of all those activities which affect the thought process today in our society, in our country.
You know, R.D. Ranade.
Yes, sir.
R.D. Ranade was a great scholar and a sadhaka himself.
Okay.
In one of his book, I don't exactly remember which book, Bhagavad Gita, the philosophy of God realization, or another book. He has made a statement. Buddha was a product of the Upanishadic age. This is the statement.
Okay.
What does it mean? Present day Buddhists claim Buddha rebelled against Vedas and the Upanishads. But you read in the Dhammapada, Buddha's statement, Buddha has said, who is a Brahmin? No, whatever the Upanishads and the Vedas say about values of Brahmanism, Buddha emphasizes the same thing, saying, a person who hasn't got these qualities is not a Brahmin. A person who has, there is nothing, there is nothing conflict against Brahmanism. He only, cleans us Brahmanism. Even then, you see, those days there was opposition to Karma Marga and Buddha was, he was purifying it.
So, Buddhism and Vedic philosophy, there is no dichotomy between
There is no dichotomy if you go to the root of it.
Correct.
That is why our Puranas accepted Buddha as an avatar. Now, there are only two oppositions to the Vedic stream of Indian philosophy, Buddhism and Jainism. But if you go to the root, Buddhism accepts Punarjanma. If you read Jataka stories, it is based on Punarjanma. And Jainism also accepts Punarjanma. Jainism's concept of ahimsa, taking ahimsa to its logical conclusion, is based on Punarjanma. So and based on ahimsa. Concept of ahimsa is mentioned in the Vedas and the Upanishads also. But Jainas take that ahimsa and then take it to its logical conclusion.
Right.
And you see, those days during the Vedic period, Brahmins were meat eaters. And it is the Jainas who abandoned meat eating.
And they also propagated.
Yes, propagated. And later on, Brahmins also became the vegetarians.
Saartha talks about it.
Yes. Now, then how do you say that Jainism is opposed to it? Only thing is, Jainism doesn't believe in a God which we believe. But at the same time, Jainism below worship Tirthankaras. What is the meaning of Tirthankara? Tirtha means stream. A person who has crossed the thing, stream. That's all. So how can you say that it is against the spirit of Vedic the teachings? How do you say Buddha is against? Now, in one of the stories of Buddhism, it is said that Buddha was sitting beneath a tree. It was called Shimshupa tree, and Buddha's follower, maybe Ananda or somebody, asked Buddha, you always say teach only 4 or 5 Arya Satyas. Is it all that you know?
Okay.
And Buddha said, you just count how many leaves have fallen here. And he said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's all, 7 or 8. Then he said, look up. How many leaves are there in the tree?
Right.
He said, countless. So, in the same way, you just concentrate on what I am teaching, and why do you guess about how much do I know? That means, the Vedic preaching was also, they recognized 2 levels. One is Indriya level, another was beyond Indriya level. If you go to Indriya level, you find that everything is Kshanika.
Right.
All Indriya experience is Kshanika. Whatever you see through your Indriya is also Kshanika. It may be a tree, or it may be the cloud, it may be monsoon, or it may be a person whom you love. Either that person will die or you will die at some time. From both angles,
everything
is all Kshanika, etc.
Transitory.
Yes, therefore, you go beyond the Indriya experience. That is what the Vedas, the Upanishads say. And Buddha also says, Sarvam Kshanikam. Which Sarvam? That which you experience with your Indriyas. And which is permanent then? Buddha becomes silent.
Okay.
Because he gives an example. Suppose you are walking in a forest, an arrow comes and strikes to your body. What do? Immediately your duty is to remove that and then give some bandage and then put some medicine into it.
Right.
Without doing it, do you say how beautiful the arrow is, and with what skill they
shot you.
The hunter put it, etc. Do you indulge in these things or do you remove it? In the same way, this life is full of dukkha.
Right.
And how to remove dukkha? Take me as a physician.
Okay.
Do you accept world is full of dukkha or not? Upanishads also say the same thing. And Upanishads say, you rise to the highest level, paramartha, in order to overcome dukkha. Buddha says, give up asha, that's all. So, going to the paramartha, Buddha is silent. But to give up asha, both the Vedas and Buddha agree with each other.
So, the faith systems in India, they are not contradictory, they are complementary.
They are not contradictory. That is why R.D. Ranade said, Buddha is a product of the Upanishadic age. It's a very important statement by a great scholar. Buddha is the product of the Upanishadic age. What does it mean?
That there is no dichotomy.
The Upanishads were not composed by one person. Different Upanishads are composed by different persons. So there are so many Upanishadic rishis.
Right.
And Buddha was one of them. And he, found the truth in one way, saying, if you believe in Sarvam Chanikam, it is easy to overcome Asha. That means it is easy to overcome Dukkha. Asha, Dukkha, and then Shashvata are interrelated. So you remove the concept of Shashvata, it is easy to overcome Dukkha, and Asha, it is easy to overcome Dukkha. That is all what Buddha said. In what way is it against the Upanishads? He is a product of the Upanishads, philosophically speaking. But maybe in modern times they say Buddha was a
he countered the Vedic.
Countered to Vedic, etc. And see, Buddha was, Buddha spoke about he also spoke about what is it called? Ahimsa. He emphasizes ahimsa. But Buddha was a meat eater.
Right.
And then Buddha died because he ate a what is it called?
A piece of mutton. A
piece of mutton, which was rotten, and he developed loose motions, and then he died at his 80th year. In what way is he superior to Jains? Buddhism, was spread. It was accepted by a large number of people and large number of races because it was not strict about meat eating.
Okay.
It allowed meat eating, and Buddhist, Shishyas who went, propagating Buddhism, they were also eating meat.
Okay.
Jainas did not do it. They became very strict. Therefore, Jainism, could not spread
in terms of numbers.
In terms of numbers,
right,
etc. So, if you go to the essence, it is easy to synthesize whole of Indian philosophy.
Right.
And if you become political,
yes,
there is conflict. It's, some years ago, maybe some 10, 12 years back, I had been to Banaras, and just near Banaras there is, what is it called, a garden where Buddha gave his preaching, what is it, that place called? You can see in your computer. Some 7 or 8 kilometers from Banaras.
I see.
Now, I saw a big group of yatris from Maharashtra.
Okay.
I just asked him, from where do you come? They say, Maharashtra. And what did you see here? He said, we have come to see our, sacred places, like this place, and then Bodh Gaya, and so on and so forth. And he said, did you visit, I asked, did you visit Kashi?
Okay.
Then they said, Kashi, what does it mean?
Okay.
After all, this place is only something like an outer extension of Kashi. But they say, what is Kashi? I think Kashi is Vishwanath. Who is Vishwanath? We don't know.
Okay.
That means they were taught to say this.
Exclusivism.
Exclusivism. So it is going against the original approach of Buddha himself.
That is un-Indian also.
Yes, yes.
Any type of exclusivism
Yes, sir.
is un-Indian. So when
So you see, the thing is, my philosophy, my approach to Indian culture
and
is
value system.
value system is, since I have studied philosophy, I do not see any basic difference between different streams of Indian philosophy.
Okay.
Different stream of Indian philosophy. But only thing is, as it happens in other religions also, one stream doesn't marry with another stream. Even among the Buddhism, there are subsections.
Right.
This section doesn't marry from another section. The Vedic people do not marry with Jains, and among the Vedic people, different castes do not intermarry, etc. So, our problem is only this. Even this need not be a problem, because this problem has become so acute because of unemployment and because of reservation. They say this caste is taking away what rightly belongs to me because I am more meritorious, and so on. But go with absolute, philosophical viewpoint, philosophical value point, there is no basic difference.
Ekam sat vipraha
Yes,
Buddha vadanti. Saarth also mentions
Yes,
this injunction.
Huh.
In spite of that, how is it?
There is another thing, important thing here.
Okay.
There were Charvakas even during the Vedic period.
Right.
And there came Buddhism, there came Jainism, almost simultaneously it came. And then the different people were, searching truth in their own way. But take Sikhism for example. Sikhism is a bhakti cult, and they accept Rama, Krishna, and Hari, Hara, etc. All their prayers are full of Hari, Hara. Take their names also. Harpreet Singh.
Yes.
What is Harpreet Singh? Hara Preet, a person who is dear to Hara is Harpreet Singh.
Yes.
Harpreet Singh. So, if you take the route, but when it comes to politics, we say we are different, etc. It is absolutely wrong. Anyway, one great important thing which I discovered for myself is, we have so much of freedom in India.
Okay.
In religion, we have so much of freedom. We also go to Jaina temples, and we also go to, Buddha temples. And Jains come to our temple, and Buddhists also were coming to our temples, but it is only modern this thing, this political movement which made
one Marathi Sant had said, Jari, Sthari, Kashti, Pashani. God is present in Jari. Jari is in water. Sthari is land. Kashti, wood. And Pashan, stone. In all forms.
Yes. But you take other religions.
Semitic.
Semitic. Because they are based on faith. We are not based on faith.
We are based on...
No.
We are based on logic?
Yes, yes. Because one thing is what happened in our country is there were original myths. At a later stage, original myths were developed into a full-blown stories. These full-blown stories became Puranas. And Puranas were utilized in Ramayana Mahabharata, and also new Puranas were created in Ramayana and Mahabharata. And now we are dependent on so many Puranas, Ashtadasha Purana and so on and so forth, etc. One may believe in Purana, one may not believe in Purana. You may believe in Rama, you may not believe in Rama. That is not our Hinduism. Real Hinduism is in Ashtanga Yoga, and then going to Purushartha, final Paramartha, and realizing oneself, becoming one with Parabrahman, or you may keep your identity separately, but you realize the Parabrahman, etc. So at the ultimate stage, what happens is there are differences. But if you take the values like the Ashtanga Yogas, what are they start with? Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, Samadhi. All these speak the same thing. Even Buddhism
Speaks about
believes in the same dhyana. Jainism believes in the same. But at the ultimate, they will say you will reach, Jina, or you will reach Buddha.
So the essence is the same.
Yes, essence is the same. And you are free to express about God. You are free to express your experience.
You are free even not to believe.
Not to believe, etc. But not so in the Semitic religion.
Certainly not.
In Islam, if you say a word against the Prophet, you will be cut off. That is what the Prophet himself has ordered.
Yes.
And in Christianity, if you go against the church, then you will be tortured.
Blasphemy.
Yes, tortured, etc. So there is no freedom. But in the West, because of modern science, Protestantism developed. And mostly it is the Protestants who discovered modern machines, who discovered modern ships, and who started, going across the oceans and then discovering new lands, etc., and start business, becoming rich. And mostly it's the Protestants, like Western Europe and then Britain, who have become rich. So they believe in, they say, Protestants believe
capitalism and imperialism.
Yes. And Protestants believe you have the freedom to read Bible yourself and understand it yourself. But Catholicism says no, only church and only the church priest interprets, and you must believe in that.
So there is an enforcement in the form of a single center.
Yes, sir.
Or there is a protest against the center.
Yes.
So dichotomous. Sir, along these lines, again I would like to catch your attention to the title of my thesis, and hopefully you also went through the synopsis which I sent you, which is not actually a synopsis in the formal sense, it is a summary. I'll refer to one of the terms given by the critical theory itself, appropriation. nowadays we find that some narratives of the culture of the people in India are being appropriated, and very distorted interpretations have been made of some cultural narratives. Technically, theoretically, they call it appropriation. For example, reading the writings of Swami Vivekananda along the lines of socialism and communism. So only to foreground, at some point he may have talked about in a critical way, he must have talked about how ritualism is not a very desirable form of worshipping or spirituality. But that does not mean that he was against the cultural values of the people. So we say that a certain set of proponents of some ideologies which have originated into the Hegelian and the Marxian ideologies, they appropriate nowadays for the political purposes, whatever cultural politics that keeps happening in the name of cultural Marxism, neoliberalism. So can we say that in the backdrop of this dichotomous approach, we can appropriate the term which the Western philosophy has produced, dialectics, and reinterpret that term in the Indian context to speak of the Indian ethos? Can we say that? Is there a possibility, temporarily though, to pursue the word dialectics, not in the Hegelian sense or not again in the Marxian sense? Marx talks about dialectical materialism and so on, not in that sense, strictly in the denotative sense. The dictionary meaning of dialectics is somewhat which inspired me to perceive it along the lines of the immensely diverse and divergent value system that we find in India, which might not point at a single truth or the authoritative understanding of truth, but it has a commitment to the endless pursuit to be in union with reality. I'll put my question in a nutshell form. Can the word dialectics be appropriated in the Indian narratives or in the narratives of Indian cultural values and redefined and reinterpreted as the Indian alternative to the dichotomous entities which we talked about?
See, dialectic or any other concept. For example, Descartes made a statement, cogito ergo sum. Hegel made the statement dialectic, triadic dialectic, he says. He is not synthesis. They are tools. Once you accept those tools, you will be bound to come to the conclusion which original tools have produced.
Okay.
Therefore, in order to explain our philosophy, why should you use Western terminology?
Okay.
You see, each philosophy develops its own logic. Each philosophy. Now, if you accept that logic, you will come to that philosophy. That is why Jainism, in order to explain the meaning of a sentence, in order to explain the meaning of a universal principle or subject, object, predicate, each school of philosophy has its own interpretation.
Right.
Now, if you accept this logic, you have to come to, you must accept their conclusion. So it has become a fashion with us. See, in America, there is a saying in universities: publish or perish.
Yes.
You must publish something.
Okay.
Then only you will get a promotion. Then only you will become you will get a permanent post, like a professor's post, etc. So they are searching for for things which appear to be new. So they take one concept from here and then apply it to other, and then write a big book of 400 pages.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
They call it the application of theory.
Yes. Therefore, this I disagree with this very concept of application of theories, other theories.
In my opening chapter of the thesis, I have made one deliberation along these lines. Even in the field of literary research in the Department of English, nowadays we find that this fashion has got perfectly settled. In fact, the mainstream research nowadays that happens in English departments nowadays, it only focuses on this particular aspect of application of some critical theory or other to a work of literature. In the first chapter I have given a title to that subsection called Text is the Context. So a work of literature need not be read and analyzed and researched in the larger context which is outside the text, in the form of the critical theory. Because what happens, as you said it, sir, right now, the critical theory becomes a tool, and the tool determines the outcome or the nature of the outcome. So, if you are using feminism as a tool to read Shakespeare's Hamlet, then you will not read it by focusing only on what the text talks about. You will read it in terms of Ophelia's point of view, because it is a feminist reading of Hamlet. So in this process what happens is that the literary text is sent in the background and the theory becomes prominent. So there is something called a predetermination of the conclusions. In my thesis I have said that I want to opt out from this established practice of application of theory to a literary work. But in case of the analysis of your novels, what I found interestingly is that your novels produce, or they at least suggest, the theoretical construct for the researcher to read the texts in the light of the text itself. In Marathi we use two terms, Swayam Prakashit, Paraprakashit. I have tried to analyze it along these lines, that Bhayrappa's texts they are lit by their own light. They need not be interpreted by applying any critical theory as such. And why is it so? Because your novels specifically talk of the indigenous value systems. While reading your novels, I always felt that you have done to novel what great singers and musicians in India have done to the instrument called violin. It is originally a Western musical instrument, violin. But our great musicians, singers, with the miraculous touch to that instrument, the miraculous touch of Shruti Sangeet, which is practiced in India. Now that instrument has got so perfectly embedded, it has got so perfectly blended with the Indian music tradition and singing tradition of classical music that both of them have become inseparable, violin and Indian music. As a student of literature and criticism, I believe that this is something called appropriation. We appropriated the instrument called violin. Likewise, your novels have appropriated the genre called novel, which is originally founded somewhere in the Western world. In English novels, like the 18th century English novels, novelists, Fielding and Samuel Richardson and others, they pioneered it, and then it developed all through the 19th and 20th century. But your novels specifically, in one sense, disengaged the English novel in India, translated or written in English originally, from the Western canons or the stronghold of Western literature. That is one. I would compare your novels with the likes of the so-called immigrant novelists, which we read and learn in the name of diasporic fiction. We have Amitav Ghosh, then we have Jhumpa Lahiri, Chitra Banerjee, Divakaruni, a host of them. When I compared the representation of India and Indian cultural values in their novels with the representation of India and the core value systems in India in your novels, I was almost convinced that the process of appropriation of the genre of novel is complete, and it got complete at your hands. Following the same logic of appropriation, if we narrativize the word dialectics accordingly, with due respect to the view which you shared, sir, that the tool determines the nature of the conclusion. If you are using the tool in Western philosophy, then it is obvious that the conclusions which will come out, which will be formed, those conclusions will be determined by the tools. But if we narrativize the word dialectics as the Indian alternative of the Western dichotomous logic or dichotomy of logic, which kind of believes in us versus other situation. You are a leftist, you are a rightist. Man versus woman. Adult versus youth. Light versus darkness, or light versus night. So this is the dichotomy of perspective, perception. In reality, this dichotomy doesn't exist. Light turns into darkness, or the absence of light is darkness. There can be no independent understanding of darkness without light, and darkness turns into light. There is a meeting ground. Following this, again, what I have observed about your novels is that in the traditional sense, content is considered as one feature of writing and style is another. But your novels also observe the meeting ground of content and style. So the traditional classification between content and style, the distinction or the difference between content and style, it comes at a meeting point in your novels. I will cite the example of Avarana. In Avarana, Amir and Lakshmi argue, debate. Lakshmi and Professor Shastri argue and debate. Khwaja Jahan and the sage whom he meets at the time of the demolition of the Kashi Vishwanath temple, that sage, there is a debate between them. In Saarth, there is a debate between Nagabhatta and the interrogator, the Muslim interrogator who has held Nagabhatta as a captive. There is a debate between the two. Again, in Parva, we have a debate between Arjuna and Bhima over the issue of conformity to the decisions taken by the elder brother. We find that Arjuna keeps respecting Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, whereas Bhima carries a very practical consideration of what they have done and the consequences of what they have done. In every single novel, as a researcher and as a student of your novels, content, style, theme, ideas, value systems which you have discussed, I may be conceptually wrong in having picked up this word in Western philosophy called dialectics. But as I said, sir, there is something called a dictionary meaning of the word. Even before Hegel or Marx, they attributed some intentions to the word dialectics philosophically. The primordial meaning, the dictionary meaning of the word dialectics. And your novels, they specifically speak of this meeting ground of the ideas and values which are apparently dissimilar, divergent, even contradictory. Can we say that this dialectical mode of thinking gets manifested as the cultural diversity in India?
See, what happened in the West was Hegel came to this conclusion. I mean, he put forward this logic of dialectic. And he practically applied it to the purpose of history. And he came to the conclusion, Prussian Empire is the ultimate of history. By applying this dialectical thinking, he came to the conclusion, Prussian Empire of his time was ultimate, because he was receiving material help from the Prussian emperor.
Okay.
The same thing was taken over by Marx. Haves, have not. Haves produce, have not. And it both must be synthesized, namely by the state. That means industry, labor. There is clash.
Right.
And how do you solve the clash? Let the whole society, that is the government, take over all the
private properties.
Means of production and means of distribution. So this way, it become problem is solved, and then everything is heaven. That is what how it came.
Right.
But society is not like that. What happened in Britain was, Marx was driven out out of Germany because of his political thinking. He came to Britain. He came to Britain in search of protection. And there was a rich person called Engels. A rich person who was himself an industrialist.
Okay.
You see, that is the time of empire.
Right.
And after all, without empire, Britain could not, develop in its economic growth. So Engels helped him. And Marx, you see, at that time, there were so many industries, and then there were so many mines in Britain. So there were laborers working in mines, so many laborers working in industries, etc. Because they had to produce to sell in the
Markets.
in their empire market,
Yes.
in their colonies. Now, the work, the condition of the laborers were miserable. They were forced to work 10 hours, 12 hours a day, etc. There was no, in that cold country, there was no warm houses, and so on and so forth. Goldsmiths, deserted village.
Yes. That is an excellent record of the transformation.
That records that period. No.
Even William Blake talks about
Yes,
it.
yes.
The satanic mills.
And then Marx, British Parliament appointed a committee to go through, to get a clear picture of the conditions of the laborers. And it submitted a report. Marx got hold of all that statistics. And he used that statistics and then came to his the theory, applied the dialectic, etc.
Right.
This industry owned by private people, and then the poverty, and then synthesize it.
Right.
They recommend it to the government to take over everything. That is synthesis, and then everything is a hammer.
This is what he meant by thesis, antithesis, and
Yes,
synthesis.
that is what Marx wrote. And Marx in this context wrote, in order to communism to come, communism means commune.
Yes.
Communism to come, first the country should become industrialized.
Yes.
Otherwise communism will not come to that country.
He had held the same view even about India, which he writes about in New York
Yes,
Tribune.
Yes, and also, but the first country to adopt Marxism was Russia, which was not industrialized at all. It was all agricultural.
Oh.
But how did it come?
Okay.
It came by a group of people with guns. That is Lenin.
Yes.
So Lenin's practical work itself defeated Marx's theory.
Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky.
Yes, it became. But meanwhile, what happened was, Britain was a democratic country, and when this report was submitted to the Parliament, the Parliament took some decisions, namely, so many hours of working, minimum wages, and education for the children of the laborers, medical help for the laborers. So, several, alleviative steps Parliament took.
Right.
Therefore, communism did not come in Britain.
Yes.
And the laborers were...
They got united, but not for the revolution, but to make their country
yes.
more developed.
Yes. That means, at different stages, Parliament was taking the remedies,
Right.
reformative remedies it took. Whereas in Russia, there was no communism, there was no parliament, no democracy, and then no industry either. And it was only big landlords,
Right.
lands owned by the big landlords. So this it came through the guns. In China, it came through also came to the gun.
Yes.
In India also, this communist party believes in the gun. It is not through through the labor.
Yes.
But they have given they have indoctrinated the labor, unified the labor, and they used the labor, not for the during Indira Gandhi's period. Bombay labours was completely under the communist party and socialist party like Fernandez and others, etc.
Right.
And then they were going on strike, indefinitely, etc. So that industries fell down and the economy of the country, and so on and so on and so forth. In Britain, the labor, think at least 10 times before they go on strike.
Okay.
What will happen to the country and what will happen to the cost of living, what will happen to the prices, and in what way does it affect us, and if the industry is closed down, what will happen to us. They think 10 times at least. So Marxian theory doesn't work always. There is some kind of a pendulum.
Right.
In Britain, now one thing, communism says it will meet the fundamental requirements of all the people.
Right.
In Western Europe and then in Britain, there came the concept of fair, what is this called?
Welfare state.
Welfare society. Welfare society. That means the government is responsible for health,
Right.
responsible for unemployment support, responsible for houses, and responsible for old age people, etc. And
Welfare state.
introducing for any intelligent student to pursue his education, bank giving him loan and scholarship, and also in each department, if there is a poor student who is doing well, the professor will give him some jobs, part-time jobs to assist the professor, clerical jobs, etc. for the professor, and some salary is given to him, and so on and so forth. So this is welfare concept. They assimilate the dream of communism in a democratic setup. So this change is going on. Now what has happened in Britain is too much of state support. And where does the government get the money for it?
Right.
Tax higher.
Correct.
If you tax higher, your economy will go down.
Right.
And in this context, because the economy was going down, people voted Margaret Thatcher.
Right.
And Margaret Thatcher, when she reduced the taxation,
Okay.
and encouraged capital to flow into Britain, etc. And then she set the economy all right. But she went to, with this theory, she went to certain extent, to some extremity.
Okay.
Like, for example, she thought, for example, house rent.
Okay.
originally the concept was the house tax depends upon how big is your house and how much it costs. For example, in the market value, how much your house costs, and so on and so forth. Margaret Thatcher said, just because you have big house, it doesn't mean that you are using public resource so much. You have a palace-like house, and there are only 2 persons. And there is a small house where there are 10 people. 10 people use more water, they use more gas, more street electricity, etc. And they produce more trash, and the municipality has to spend more to remove that trash. Therefore, you must tax according to the number of people in a family, not according to the size of the house. That is taking this, capitalism to this extent. So people realized which people are in majority. Poor people are in majority. They voted out
Margaret Thatcher.
This Margaret Thatcher ruled for about 11 years or so. And she made Britain a strong country again.
In the backdrop of the Second World War.
Yeah. But she had to fall down.
Yes.
So, in democracy, it works like a pendulum, etc. So, this kind of applying this theory is, this theory, dialectic, doesn't work. It doesn't work. But it is easy to talk about it in a tea house.
That is true. But then, sir, this is exactly I would like to share with you. I have already taken a stand in my thesis that I am not applying any theory to the novels. I would like to catch your attention to this very dictionary meaning.
The Oxford English Dictionary defines the word dialectic in following: art of investigating the truth by discussion and logical argument. Process whereby contradictions merge to form a higher truth. Any situation or discussion involving the juxtaposition or conflict of opposites. Yes.
It is in the third sense
Yes.
that I have applied it to your novels. And I have made it very clear that I am not applying it by taking into consideration the Hegelian, the Marxian, or political, or even the philosophical connotation of the word dialectics, strictly denotative and dictionary meaning. It is the third meaning which caught my fancy, and then I found that in novel after novels, your narratives, they do not point at something called dialectics. You are far too creative a novelist to be mindful of the significance of the terminologies in the philosophy, insofar as using them as a strategy is concerned. A creative writer might not depend, a creative writer like you might not depend on any theoretical construct.
No.
Certainly, that I experienced. As a researcher, what I found is that your novels, by all means, they exploit the situations very creatively to bring your characters at a point of collision between values. There is a collision. They strike at one another, against one another. Amir has produced a short film and he wants Lakshmi or Razia to write the script for it. That is the point of collision. Dharmaraja played the Dyut And Bhima starts criticizing him. Arjuna says, you can't criticize the elder brother. And then comes Krishna, who says that the challenge of fighting to a Kshatriya and the challenge for gamble are to be dealt with separately. There is no heroism in responding positively to the challenge of gamble. That is the higher truth that I am referring to. But in order to reach to that higher level of understanding, one, and two, in your novel itself you have used one excellent phrase, and that is my most favorite phrase. To be in union with reality.
With the
reality.
Oh,
That is the essence of all ideas and ideologies and faith systems and value systems in India, and even of all philosophies. To be in union with reality. Now, reality may be complex, it may be contentious, it may be confrontational, it may be full of cacophony. There is no single voice. But what is ultimately important is to be in union with it, not to reject it, and not to dwell in the fool's paradise that there could be a solution in the end. So pursuit is the end in itself. Similar thing I also found about your narrative on progressivism. Satyabhama talks about progressivism. Professor Shastri talks about progressive history. Even about that, what I have found is that you somewhere defend or you try to put across the culturally sensitive progressivism which has originated into the indigenous liberal value system as the more sustainable form of progressive thinking in the context of Indian society than the borrowed, imported progressivism which is founded only on ideologies, certain set of ideologies and principles. What is your view about this particular aspect that with which I have analyzed? Do you agree with it?
No, repeat it, summarize it again.
I will summarize the question. Progressivism, which is sensitive about Indian culture and cultural values, and progressivism, which is derisive of Indian cultural values. Between the two,
see, the word progressivism is appropriated by the communists.
exactly.
It is appropriation because the word progress came into use in India by the Communist Party of India, supported by the Russians. You know, those days when I was a student, there was what was called progressive literature. First with this, what is it, Mulk Rajanand,
Right.
and other, and it came in Kannada also. For some time, there was progressive, but soon it died. And you also referred to Shastri.
Yes. He talks about progressive history.
No. In Pune, there was a seminar on Avaran. There were, huge audience. That day there were, 2 or 3 other functions taking place in Pune. And the organizers of this seminar on Pune, on Avarana, were rather worried that we may not get sufficient number of audience.
Oh.
But in spite of three important functions taking place in Pune, this house was overflowing with audience.
Okay.
And at the end, I had to answer questions from the audience. A person asked me, there is a feeling in Maharashtra that you have taken Anantamurti as your model for
Writing novels.
Shastri's character.
Okay.
What do you say? They said.
Okay.
I just said, I ask you whether there are no Shastris in Maharashtra, tell me. Then they say, oh, there are many Shastris in
That's true.
Maharashtra. And then I said, have you not seen Shastri in Delhi? And they said, oh yes, Delhi is living on Shastris.
Yes, exactly.
And what about Calcutta?
Okay.
What about others? I said, so India is full of Shastris. Now the thing is, after reading this, why do you identify it only with Anantamurti? Because he is from Karnataka and I have written the novel in Kannada. But why don't you put it to a Marathi Shastri?
Exactly.
They said, yes, it is correct. Then he said, in that case, it only shows the success of my creative imagination.
Precisely.
It only shows the Sadharanikarana.
Exactly. Simplification.
No, universalization.
Universalization.
Universalization. That is, once I create a character, it applies to a whole group of people in our country.
Right.
That means the credit should go to my creativity.
Absolutely.
Then why do you mention only Anantamurti? Why don't you mention anybody in Maharashtra? Many people in Maharashtra.
At times, even such questions are politically motivated.
So this way, the communists appropriated the word progressive. Even now, the leftists use the word progressive. Dalits use the word progressive. Now, in each group, what is the definition of progressive? Each group defines progressiveness in its own way. That means progressiveness means reservation. Are you for reservation or are you against reservation? If you are not for reservation, that means you are not progressive, you are regressive.
Exactly.
Now, in the case of Harijans, Dalits, they say this reservation should be there for next 1000 years. You must say yes, otherwise you are not progressive, etc. But if you come to free enterprise economy and give statistics like, for example, some 20 years back, in order to get a telephone, you had to wait at least for 1 year.
Right.
And if your telephone goes off, those days the technology was so poor in India that if your telephone goes off, in order to get it repaired, you would take 3 months.
Oh.
Yes, I have experienced it. It did not take 3 months because there was no private repairer. Government did not allow it because government believed that everything government will do it.
Right.
And you apply, to government, etc. It would take 3 months, etc.
Right.
Now look at the situation. Every villager, every vegetable vendor has a telephone, a mobile, etc. Do you call free enterprise as progressive or old system as the progressive?
Right.
No, again it depends. But people you know, misuse the word Prabhu.
Understood.
Oh.
Misused and politically
Yes, yes, it's a
manipulated.
politically manipulated.
So, can we say that the progressivism which considers the cultural distinctiveness of India in the global scale, the progressivism, should it be culturally sensitive?
You see, one thing, remember in our country, there is a feeling, there was a feeling of suspecting all our politicians, suspecting our prime ministers also.
Right.
But during this Lal Bahadur Shastri's period, there was the Pakistan and India war, and there was positive scarcity of food items. Now Lal Bahadur Shastri said, we do not have sufficient food in our country. Therefore, let us sacrifice at least one meal in a week.
Okay.
At least one meal in a week.
Right.
And I have taken a decision that I do not take my meal on each Monday evening.
Okay.
He announced it.
Okay.
And many people, started fasting on Monday evening.
Okay.
And not only that, all hotels in the country stopped.
Okay.
It closed at the 3 o'clock on Monday.
Okay.
No food. No, why did they do it? Because they believed in the integrity of Lal Bahadur Shastri. Because he does what he is asking the country to do. If the chief of the country has this integrity, people will follow. Now, why is it that people have voted
The present Prime Minister.
the present Prime Minister, etc. Whatever the anti-Modi propaganda that the Congress and other parties did, people believe he is a man of integrity. Because therefore they have voted him. That means this is important. In our country, what has happened was this corruption, not merely in terms of money, but corruption in every way.
Moral corruption.
Moral corruption. And he doesn't mean what he talks. He doesn't do what he talks, etc.
The sect of Parshurama Gowda
Yes.
in Tantu.
So,
But if this is true, why does Anaiya fail?
yes, sir.
Why does Anaiya fail?
Because he was mostly a Gandhian.
Okay.
And he did not have practical sense and practical courage.
Okay. That is right. Only an idealist.
Only an idealist. Why is it that Gandhiism failed during the division of the country and about the Muslim problem? You see, what happened in our country was the British, when the freedom movement was strong in India, the British called the Muslim leaders and then said, look, you are ruling the whole country. Now Marathas became strong and they occupied nearly half of the country and they dethroned you. We came and then defeated the Marathas. Therefore, you were saved by us. Now, if we leave the country now, it becomes Hindu majority and they will suppress you. Therefore, you tell us whether we should stay here or we should go. That is what the British told the Muslims. Then the Muslim says, no, you must stay. And then also the British approached the caste leaders in the country and then said, some leaders, some castes are backward, some castes are forward, etc. And backwardness and forwardness, they defined only on the basis of percentage of people having government job. Government job or East India Company job. And they divided the Hindus on this basis. And they were continued to rule. Anyway, they have to leave. Nehru became the Prime Minister. Nehru applied the same technique of the British. And a considerable percentage of Muslims stayed on in the country. Ambedkar said, let us extend the population. Ambedkar said it. But Gandhi and Nehru said, no. They have their very high ideals. And what will happen to their image internationally, etc. It happened in my life that I wanted to see the whole of India. That desire was in me since my student days. And luckily it happened that I got a job in Gujarat. And when I was in Gujarat, I used to attend the Indian philosophical conferences, which was taking place in different parts of the country. I used to attend. And when I was going to attend, usually this conference would take place during the Christmas vacation. And whenever I would go to any place, from there I would travel around that place. Not only that, but I would go to villages also near the. Somehow I would manage to go to villages in different parts of the country and stay in villages, each village for 3 days, 4 days, etc. and stay in the family, not in any hotel. And afterwards, when I went to Delhi in NCERT, it was my job to attend the seminars on philosophy of education, training in philosophy of education to professors and then readers of Department of Education in the universities and calling the people from different universities and I was conducting the whole thing. NCERT was giving funds and we would appoint a local professor in the universities to make local arrangements and I was looking after the academic part of it. But I would contact the local professor saying after this usually it would take place 10 days. It is called refresher course. And I would ask the local professor after this 10-day course was over, I want to stay in a village in your state. It should not be too near the big cities. Right. Because if the village is near the big cities, that village reflects that city, not the rural area. Because they every day they come to city and pure rural quality will be lost. So this professor would arrange something, at least 100 kilometers away from the main city and all that, and make arrangement for me to stay in the home. And I would talk with everybody in the home because I could talk Hindi. And also, I would go alone and then sit somewhere in the front of the village, beneath a tree or in a temple, etc., where the usually villagers would come and they would ask me from where do you come, etc., etc. Villagers are quite talkative in India, and then I would start conversation. What do you grow here? What is the price of that, etc. And then gradually take to which party in this village, vote, etc. And who is the richest man? And gradually asking about how do people gamble here, and then also how do we, which is the richest man, and how many keeps do you have? I mean, do they have, etc. And they are very frank about it.
That would open them up.
They would open, etc. So this way, I would have a feeling of these villages in different parts of the country. And I myself come from the village,
Yes, I know Santeshivara.
yes, Santeshivara, etc. The result was I could have a feeling of the whole of India. Food, except the fact that in some people roti is major and the rice is minor, and in South India rice is major. Apart from these small things, who do they marry? What are their marriage custom? What are their all these things make me understand that India is one. Culturally, India is one. But local customs are there, different local customs are there. And I have traveled in the Himalayas, different parts of the Himalayas, each at least 3-4 times. Uh, on foot also I have traveled in those days. Once I was traveling in from Joshimath to go down and then climb to Badrinath. Those days there was no bus. So I was climbing and I was having a servant to carry my baggage. And when I was climbing, there was the sound of the dum 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 dum. It is war-like sound. You just turned, and some 10 or 12 people were holding these swords. And then a young man, 15-year-old man, was carrying a 8 or 10-year-old girl. And he was going, and these people were giving him, surrounding him, giving support. And I thought it's a kidnap case. And they went away. And then, after about some half an hour, another group came again with that Viravesh sound, and then with swords, etc. They were following them. Then I thought there was a kidnap case, and the girls' side of the people are going, and there will be a file, and there will be a murder. I thought it's a. But anyway, they went fast, and I could not climb in the speed in which those hilly people climb. And after some time, this my Gurkha was waiting for me. I went and then I asked him, "What is it that carrying the girl, etc." Then he said, "हमारा शादी है." And
Okay.
and then he said, "Shadi, how can he carry the girl,
Like this.
etc." And he said, "No, no. कृष्ण भगवान रुक्मिणी को क्या किया?
True.
He kidnapped her.
Yes.
That is our custom.
They are being true to the story.
Story. So this way, all our marriage or death or whatever the customs and rituals in our country are based on either Ramayana or Mahabharata.
That is true. But again, what I find is that
Huh?
they are diverse
Huh.
because here in the intellect
Huh.
they are so very dynamic and dialectic.
Yes, sir.
There isn't single way of doing things.
No. But the thing is, you go to the root, it is one
It is one. Of course.
throughout India.
No. When I say dialectics
Hmm.
or when I say diverse and dynamic, I don't mean that they are opposed to each other. They
Yes.
are not opposed
No.
to each other. They may be different.
But my when I write, my locale may be a village in Karnataka, but it reflects the whole of India.
Je pindi te brahmandi.
You know this Dhatu.
Yes.
Dhatu is a story of the whole of India.
Absolutely.
Caste system in the whole of India. Because I have the experience of whole India.
Not just that.
Huh.
Dhatu is not the story of the entire India
No.
in terms of the problems that it discusses.
Yes.
It is also the story of entire India in terms of the solution that it suggests. There is no authoritative conclusion. But what Satyabhama says is that confrontation
No.
between the so-called upper caste and the lower caste people, that is not going to solve the problem of caste discrimination. Cooperation between two caste groups alone, and the most significant observation that your novel makes, cartoon, and that is the true form of progressivism in the Indian context, that when the upper castes they shade off caste superiority or caste supremacy, that could be the real beginning of Jati Anta in our society.
And also, you take Mandra. I am from Karnataka, but in Mandra, nothing takes place in Karnataka. It takes place in Bombay. It takes place in Maharashtra, Delhi, and Gwalior, and Patna, Kolkata, etc. So it is a pan-Indian theme.
Absolutely.
And how many of our writers have this, experience of the whole of India to create it in the form of a novel? I have created Maharashtrian characters in Mandra,
Yes, that is
and I have created see this take Saartha, for example. The whole thing takes place in North India,
North India.
and Parva it is North India, etc.
Etc.
How do I have it? Because of experience. That is why people in all the parts of India love my novels.
That is the reason you are the most widely translated
No.
novelist at present.
Because each person, understand when they feels that the story is taking place in his own state.
That is the that is the basic Indianness
Yes, it
which
is.
connects.
Yes, that's why I am an Indian writer. I don't say I am a Kannada writer. I am an Indian writer writing
writes
in
in
Kannada.
Kannada.
Yes,
That is
that's
true.
all.
H.M. Nayak has also made a similar comment in one of his writings that Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa is an Indian writer who writes in Kannada. That is very true. And that is because I believe there is some basic Indianness which connects all of us, irrespective of language, as you said, culinary habits, and sartorial culture, the culture of races. That is different. Rituals are different, festivals are different, but the
Rituals are not different.
okay,
Basic, forms are different.
yes, certainly.
Forms are different.
Their manifestation is different.
But the manifestations are maybe different, but the basis is the same. Basis is the same.
The feeling behind them are the
Yes,
same.
yes. Therefore, India is culturally one.
Correct.
And if the political parties break that cultural oneness of India, because they are destroying the country.
Certainly. Certainly. This is the integral oneness.
Yes.
And this integral oneness cannot be measured in physical and materialistic terms. It is the spiritual cohesiveness
Yes.
of India that makes the culture one. Yes, sir.
So
Yeah, we'll stop now because I have taken a lot of time.
Yeah.
One last request, please. What happened when you spoke about the thesis?
Uh,
Unfortunately, this had stopped.
uh.
So, could you please repeat that once?
Which one?
About the thesis, about the work. That is for my personal satisfaction.
No, it's a good thesis involving original thoughts.
Okay, sir.
What original thought? It is not just summarizing the 6 novels, etc. Original thoughts and the way in which you have arranged the synopsis, etc. itself indicates that it is a original and it is worth publication.
Yes. Thank you very much.
So,
Dhanyawad. Namaskar.
no.
So, friends, for almost more than an hour, we have remained under the spell of S.L.Bhyrappa's views and his ideas about his novels. I can only say this at this moment, that reading a novel written by S.L.Bhyrappa is an experience in itself, and having a conversation, an intimate conversation with S.L.Bhyrappa, the maker of all his novels, having a conversation with the maker himself is definitely a thing of beauty and a joy forever in itself. With this, I thank Dr. S.L.Bhyrappa, first of all, for taking out some time to be with us here, and I immensely thank him particularly for unleashing and for sharing with us the thought process behind all his novels. I wish you good health, sir, and I also extend my warm feelings of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for watching this interview.